Hi, this is Hot Girls Build Cults, the show where we explore the art of gathering, the business of belonging, and the people creating communities worth showing up for. I'm your host, Megan Lycan, storyteller, community builder, and lifelong people connector. Each week, we talk to the people creating movements, spaces, and communities that make you say, I want in. And guess what? You're invited. Let's get into it. So today I'm sitting down with Ari McDaniel, who is an award-winning leader in startup and tech PR, known for turning under-the-radar founders into cultural movements people can't help but join. She's the creator of Cult Communications, a PR framework behind today's most magnetic brands, and founder of Cultworthy, a network dedicated to scaling community-driven companies. Through the Startup PR Initiative, she's redefining how early-stage founders navigate media, visibility, and growth, while also serving as a global CEO of the Black Tech Public Relations Society, where she champions diversity in tech and VC communications. Welcome.
Hello. I'm so excited for this.
I'm so excited to sit down with you today. I guess you've got a lot on your plate.
I
think
do.
a really great place to start is just what, out of all the things that you've got your hands in right now,
Yeah.
what stands out as what's taking up most of your time?
I feel like what's taking up most of my time is just my vision for startups and creator community as a whole. As you know, I feel like there's a different startup, especially in the tech space, coming out literally every day. You're always seeing a new startup, and we're seeing a lot more startups needing things like storytelling and community and all of these different roles that are, paying so much money just coming out of kind of nowhere. And I feel that when it comes to my background is in public relations, I feel that there's still a huge disconnect between public relations and startups. Just the culture around PR, when you go to a conference, like a startup conference, PR usually isn't there. And that's something that's really important to me, is bringing PR closer to just the startup world, as well as, bringing more visibility to cult brands. I feel like cult brands are the brands that we're looking at right now, just all across different industries. And those are the brands that are the most important.
Yeah, I'm really excited to sit down and talk to you today because compared with some of my other guests, you're coming at it from a slightly different angle. A lot of people I'm talking to are community builders, but you're looking at community and cult brands from a PR lens. Can you just talk to me a little bit about how you see community building in the space?
Yes, absolutely. I want to say first, when it comes to cult brands, they absolutely hate traditional PR. It's a huge thing. They're the rebels of the industry, and a lot of cult brands don't want the traditional earned media, the traditional ways that PR operates is something that they're rebelling against, which is why I created Cult Communications, PR for cult brands. It's a specific, this is for you. And I think that we're seeing a lot of, people want, especially investors as well, people want companies that people are obsessing over, that already have a following, that are already being talked about obsessively. And that is what's really important, is finding ways to really build that obsession in a way that connects people and doesn't alienate people and makes people feel like they're a part of a community, a tribe. So that's really, very important to me from a PR perspective is, every brand needs visibility, but how we're going about that now in 2026 is going to look a lot different, especially with social media. You don't need to get into Forbes to become a big company anymore or to be noticed. Right. You can literally do it all on your own on social media. So where do PR people come into play when it comes to all of that now?
Yeah. I guess from your perspective, how would you define a cult brand, and if you have any examples just for anyone who's not in this space, to kind of what are you trying to say? So we're all starting on the same page.
Yes, absolutely. So I guess generally speaking, when you're looking at cult brands, we have a lot every day that we see. I used to work for Sephora, the Pepsis. I worked for some of the larger companies, which those are more of the heritage. They've been around forever, the larger cult brands. But now you're seeing startups as well that are also building their obsession. I know that, of course, we all know what ChatGPT and Claude and all these different things. Those are cult brands. People are talking about them and they don't even really have to do anything. They're around, they have a cult following. People are creating, UGC content around them. Claude itself, just looking at the AI space, we're able to create our own philosophies and things to create these brands, whether you're a startup or you're not a startup. So for me, a cult brand is a brand that has not just an audience. You don't just have followers, you don't just have members, you have, a culture of obsession. There's like that level of like, I can't get
Right.
enough of this. So that's what makes a cult brand to me. And when it comes to PR and the narrative, a lot of cult brands, they have, I know we're going to talk about this probably in this interview, but a lot of cult brands have that, what are we rallying against? Like, what are we defending? Like, it has that us versus them kind of mentality. And that's what we're seeing a lot when it comes to, Anthropic and like, all of the other different companies going head to head against each other in this AI
Right.
space specifically. So that's what makes a cult brand. Like, do you have an enemy? Or are you just kind of, following the grain, and, that does not work anymore.
Yeah, if you're like standing out against the grain. And then also just like I guess what makes a cult brand is like widespread adoption, and it make like its users or its consumers like can't wait to share it with their community, their people.
Yeah.
I
And
guess like oh, go
I
ahead,
was gonna say,
sorry.
I was gonna add something else that kind of also makes a cult brand is like, do you have a wait list? Are people waiting in line for your product, before it even comes out? Are people, a lot of cult brands, they don't even have to look at influencers in the same way because they have people on TikTok already making content about their product. So those are other indicators that you have a cult brand on your hands as well.
Yeah. How important is it from your perspective, like
Mhm.
for a cult brand to have maybe a fan club versus a community? And like how do you decide what their strategy should be?
Yeah, I feel like this question is so complex to me because when we're looking at fan clubs now, it's so nuanced. To me, like traditionally a fan club is something that it's driven by more hype. Like again, like the wait list, it's like social media, it's like people commenting like I'm obsessed with this, but they might not be necessarily super attached to the mission. Like you look at like a lot of the fashion designers and like the beauty industry, everyone's obsessed with the product, but do you understand like sustainability or like how they're, really
Yeah.
helping the environment or or making people feel beautiful or, whatever the case may be? Do you always have like that mission and purpose under your belt? So I feel like sometimes fan clubs aren't as connected to that wide mission that a company might have. And then you have community, which is more, again, the purpose driven side of, I guess, the belonging umbrella.
Yeah.
You have, community, like you might have a Discord or like you might have these meetups that are more purpose driven to, the good for all type of thing related to the product. But I think what we're seeing a lot now in 2026, especially, is that a lot of these fan clubs are being integrated into the belonging like umbrella structure. So I feel like that is what, really shifts things. It's like, yes, a fan club might on the surface level be like super superficial in a way, but now when you kind of create a place for them in the overall purpose driven side of the business, it really changes things. Yeah, I feel like that's something else that we're seeing. So we're kind of moving away
Yeah.
from that traditional, like superficial side of fan clubs to, and a lot of times too, when fan clubs are people that love the product, but they're also, depending on the industry, I've worked with a lot of gamers and a lot of gaming industry people side of tech as well. And they're creating like lore, like they are like doing more, like they're creating worlds. They're like doing all
Yeah.
this crazy stuff behind the scenes as well. So sometimes fan clubs are expanding more than even, the community itself. And that's why it's so important to integrate them together.
Yeah. I was also thinking as you were describing it that, like, from my perspective, the difference between a fan club and a community for a brand specifically is also in like how it's used. Like when I think of a fan
Yeah.
club, it's like I have to have this thing so that my friends see that I have it. Where like a community, it might be like how you're applying it. So like where you want to jump on and show a tutorial about how you're using it in your day-to-day life. So like right
Yeah.
now I'm trying to think of like so wigs are a big thing for me right now is like
Yeah.
there's
Love wigs.
communities around wigs like where do you buy them, like how do you resell them, how do you style them, like there's a whole like tutorial community about it, or
Hmm.
like for example like the Dyson Airwrap, like it's both, I think both a fan club and a community because it's like you get bonus points for like having one because it's like super
Yeah.
popular, but then there's also community around is like, oh, watch how I am using my Airwrap to style my hair, like this is my routine, like that's where like the community comes into play, is like how it's applied. I mean, I know that's not
Absolutely.
the same for like all brands because not all brands have that, but in my mind, that's kind of how I was differentiating it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that as well, especially when it comes to like the beauty, fashion, like that industry. I do feel that it does get a little bit more complex when it gets to like the tech industry. I think one of my favorite brands, of course, everybody's favorite brand is Substack. They, have a lot of fans, but like their mission is freedom of speech. Sometimes that doesn't always like, when you're writing on Substack, you're a fan of like yourself, like you're writing about the stuff that you like. But,
Yeah.
like the idea of like they're really building a platform, like one of the only platforms where you can really talk about whatever you want up there. And that's like a huge, driver for why they're so popular. But yes, I 100% agree.
Yeah. So you were talking about kind of like the polarity between brands and like what makes it cult worthy is like a brand that people join versus one that they defend. Like, can you
Yeah.
elaborate a little bit more on that?
I believe that especially when it comes to startups, brands that are entering the space and they're new, you definitely have to have first you have to have an eye on this is coming from like a PR person, of course. You have to
Yeah.
understand like your competitors. And I feel like a lot of people don't always want to do that. They kind of want to just be like, no, I'm out here on myself. I have a great product. But in order to really be successful in the market, especially even in beauty, it doesn't really matter what it is. You kind of have to have like your own, I like to call manifesto. What is your
Mm,
manifesto? And that really includes like, what is your vision for the future? It goes beyond just a traditional vision statement and mission statement. No, we are like, we're so past that now. Like now we
yeah.
really need manifestos to really like, what are you rallying against? Now behind, because that's kind of how you're going to build your audience. And now we're living in a time where like people want to follow, as like they want to follow mission driven organizations. They want to feel like they're a part of a movement. And
Yeah.
I think that we're in a place now, like I mentioned, like with AI, like AI has become not only products, but it's a movement. And that's really important to really have an understanding. And that comes down to like your narrative and your positioning, all these PR words, and cult communications. It comes down to being able to really like put on paper, like in a way that is compelling, of course, what are you defending that's different in the culture that is not being, done essentially.
Yeah. No, that's so true. And so I was a former product marketer, so I would often go in and like we would do like messaging, positioning workshops with like startups and tech companies specifically. And so that reminds me is like it definitely is like a top-down mission-driven activity because otherwise you're just looking at like feature parity. Like how are you
Yeah.
standing out? Like who are you standing for? Like at the
Yeah.
end of the day, everyone's kind of solving the same problem, specifically like
Yeah.
in software. So it's like, how do you stand out? And it's often like your mission is the thing that differentiates them as opposed to like features.
Absolutely. In tech, I keep bringing up tech because it's like considered one of the more boring like industries compared to like, like fashion. Fashion is like fashion shows and all that.
Yeah. Or like
Tech
like any consumer brand,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
exactly. So like I know like a lot of the tech players now they're really trying to become more fun. That is like a huge trend. Like they're having more events, they're having more, meetups and different things now. And, it's really important that you're able to articulate that on all levels. And I know that you mentioned marketing. I think we're seeing that like a lot of the cult brand narrative stuff really was like with the marketing people. Like
Yeah.
I feel like a lot does come down on marketing, but really it's something that kind of has to infiltrate all areas of your business,
Yeah.
not just
Yeah.
marketing.
Do you have any examples of like, I guess, software or tech companies that are investing in community or building, like finding like unique or novel ways of building belonging into their ecosystem?
I can speak on, I just made a post about this on LinkedIn recently. I feel that like all of the I guess the fortune markets like Polymarket and Kalshi, like I feel like they are really like taking over the community building. They're taking it to a whole another level. I've never seen betting, tech companies that are like more so on like betting is kind of a superficial thing. It's almost like a vice, essentially it
Yeah.
is. And like
Yeah.
they're making it, in New York, they created a grocery store, a free grocery store to like, feed people. These are things that, are very kind of stepping outside of the box to build community and not just like have people like betting. People are still betting, but
Yeah.
they're trying to make it more mission driven and more purposeful. And I feel like that is very interesting shift to see, as well as with a lot of the AI tech companies. I see, I made another post about this as well. A lot of the AI tech companies are trying to solve this lonely epidemic that we're having. A lot
Mm-hmm.
of these, there's so many different avatars and different, beyond ChatGPT, there are platforms that are, creating, I guess, relationships with, AI
Yeah.
to help you get through like mental health issues and different things like that. And I feel like a lot of those companies are moving from the digital space and they're now creating events like in real life as well. So I feel like to really see these super AI driven companies to find a way to like get off digital and come build community with real people is something that is very interesting to me and how they're going about it.
Yeah. No, that's super cool and needed. And I think like it's a natural progression of what happens is like we lean into is the more we lean into AI, like we need that polarity of bringing more human interactions at the same
Yes.
time to kind of balance it out. And I think like I'm really happy to see that trend because I think what scares a lot of people about AI specifically is like, oh, if we fully lean into AI, there's so many dystopian films about like we just let it go way too far and it's like
Yeah,
it's cool to see like so many companies be intentional about creating that counterbalance.
absolutely.
I guess as we look at because you're working with different brands,
Mhm.
how how should how should founders show up to deepen loyalty within their for their brand like
From a PR perspective, I have a lot of thoughts on this, but I'll keep it short. Number one, I think working with a lot of startups, part of my job is to kind of help inspire them to speak online because
yeah.
a lot of people don't want to talk online about their product, especially if it's like an AI product. There's, a lot of criticism. There's a lot of eyes on you when you start talking about these things. So, number one, I feel that if a founder really wants to deepen loyalty with the audience and with the product teams and, just everyone involved, it's really important that they have a platform. It might not be LinkedIn, it could be any platform really, but
Mm-hmm.
there needs to be a place where they're able to share their thoughts and to really connect with people like in an authentic way. And maybe sometimes like I love LinkedIn. I'm getting back up there, as you know, Megan. But I feel
Same.
that I think LinkedIn scares a lot of founders. And I noticed that as like a PR person is that, you kind of feel like you have to sound a certain way up there. And sometimes, especially when it comes to cult brands, a lot of those founders are like, they're more creative, they're rebellious. So like LinkedIn doesn't necessarily fit their voice, but you still kind of have to find, your space, whether it's Instagram, TikTok, and whatnot. So that's the first thing is being more vocal and more, embracing thought leadership, whether it be going on podcasts, newsletters, create a newsletter, being able to kind of have that, communication with your audience and build your own fans. Second is something that I always talk about is when you're creating a startup or you're creating a company is your employees should be your first fans. Like the people that work for you, they are fans as well. So I always feel that internal communications is just as important as what you're doing externally because if you're creating a product and the people that work at your company like hate you, that's also not good. And I also look at employees as like your evangelists. They're like people also that can go out and kind of evangelize your brand and get people excited about it as well for free. You're already, paying them to work there. I think it's important that we're leveraging all aspects of the business in that way.
Yeah, yeah. I want to stay in the thought leadership realm for a little bit longer because this is
Yes.
something that like I like to so we talk about this a lot in my mastermind and I like to reframe this a lot. A lot of people when they start showing up on LinkedIn, they're like, "Oh, I need to like, come off as an expert like you're teaching someone
Hmm.
something." But I'm like it takes so much more pressure off if you think of it as like a discussion amongst like your community. Like you're just
I love that.
contributing to the discussion, which takes so much pressure off other than like I'm an authority. Like you still become an
Yeah.
authority by by like using your voice. You don't have to be like, thinking of yourself as like in a hierarchy. And I think that's where a lot of people and brands get wrong, is like it's how you approach it, is that you're contributing to the discussion as a whole.
Absolutely. And I think also I've worked at several PR agencies throughout my career. I think also, depending on the type of PR team or marketing team that you have kind of helping you with your thought leadership, it doesn't always have to feel like, oh, you have to go through like 5 different edits to create something on LinkedIn, like for someone. Like
Yeah.
it absolutely should be a lot more authentic and organic. It doesn't have to always feel like you're creating another, a press release or something.
Yeah.
And I think that is something too, is just making sure that you have the right people on your team that doesn't make everything feel like so heavy and that you can just kind of just be yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm really curious because I love that you have kind of created this sub niche in PR, like called cult
Yeah.
communications. You said like a lot of brands, especially like cult brands, like just don't vibe with traditional PR. Like, what does that look like in practice? Like, it's,
Yeah.
specifically even like the types of tactics that you explore or strategies that you explore with your clients.
The first thing that I typically do is like really have an understanding. And of course, all brands are different. They're at different stages of their journey. There's early stage, and then there's, the other stages that have a little bit more funding. So they're a little bit more established in a way. But the first thing is really assessing the systems and the frameworks. What are your communications channels that you're having to connect with your audience? Social media is, of course, one of the first ones. And a lot of times when I'm assessing social media, like when I first connect with a client, their founder isn't very active on LinkedIn or anything really. So that's the first thing, is really having an understanding of what are the narratives that we're actually putting out beyond just like the fun marketing stuff on Instagram or TikTok.
Yeah.
That can't be the only way that you're connecting with your audience. The second
So
thing,
do you see that do you see like founder visibility is a big component for cult brands that people want to know like the person behind that built something, like the person
yes,
behind the
that's
brand?
the person behind the brand, and they don't want to just know the person as it relates to the product. They want to know like who they are like as a entrepreneur. A lot of times for cult brands, one of the biggest stories when it comes to doing cult communications is telling their cult origin story, which you don't necessarily call it that, but it's
Yeah.
really just basically you started from here, you raised X amount, like kind of their journey of how they got to this cult status, how they
Yeah.
got to having a cult following. A lot of startups want to see that content. A lot of tech companies, and even if it's not a tech company, a startup company, a lot of media want to see that journey. So that's number one, is making sure that we're able to articulate the journey. And then a lot of times I give founders 3 to 4 pillars of basically themes that they can talk about. For example, if it's like an AI founder, like you should be talking about AI. Like, you need to be out here talking about AI as it relates to your product, but not just talking about AI, kind of going back to like what I mentioned before about defending, what is your unique POV? A lot of
Mhm.
founders don't have a unique POV on their industry. We can't just keep talking about the same things, especially when we're looking at conferences, conference stages, and different things like
Yeah.
that you want to talk on. If you're going to be a cult brand, you have to be bold, and you kind of have to have that, not completely rebellious, like in the sense of like you're kind of like, personality wise, but in terms of your narrative, it should be a little bit, different than what other people are talking about. So that's one of the first things that I address is our narrative, our
Mhm.
positioning, because usually that is like one of the biggest just challenges for a lot of startup founders, especially in the early stage. They don't know how to position themselves in a way that makes them, I guess, unique. And,
Mhm.
a lot of times they have the unique product, but they just don't know how to position themselves. I think something else that is really important that I work on a lot is events, is, the community component. Cold communications blends, it's basically a blending of community building and PR together, essentially.
Mhm.
And a lot of times when you're having an event, especially in the B2B space, which is very boring, again, it's like a
I was gonna
very,
say, like, how do you have a cult following and beat?
through a lot of times they leverage events.
Yeah.
They leverage events, bringing people together from, when you're working with B2B, sometimes you have different vertical markets that you're kind of selling to at the enterprise level. So making sure that your events aren't like these boring, come together gatherings. It
Yeah.
needs to be something that really excites and really, especially if you're going into a new vertical, it needs to be something that, really, I guess, connects with that audience that you're trying to connect with. So a lot of, cult communications is integrating a really solid framework for events, whether that be like you're doing LinkedIn series regularly, you're having meetups, roundtables, something to bring your audience together in the startup space.
If it's top, if you have it like top of mind, do you have any examples of like B2B that's doing this really well? It's okay if not.
Not at the top of my head. I feel like they need a lot of work, honestly. I feel like the
Yeah.
B2B space still needs a lot of work, essentially why, that's something that I'm very interested in.
Yeah, no, because I used to work in the B2B like marketing space and like
Mhm.
I was trying to think about that as well. I'm like, I mean, we built loyalty through like co-marketing campaigns and yeah, there was like some different tactics, but like yeah, when I think of like cult brands, like B2B's not screaming at me at all.
It's
It's
not
like
screaming.
a lot of consumer brands stick out like Yeah, stand out.
But I do feel there's a space when it comes to like software companies. There's tons of software companies and, of course, the B2B space. I think the B2B space is just finally now catching on to the fact that, hey, like you need to be a cult brand as well, because
Hmm.
a lot of B2B businesses, just from my own experience, from just a revenue standpoint, they often lose a lot of money because they don't know how to, I guess, talk to the different audiences that they have. For
Yeah.
example, I won't say what company it was, but I worked with a B2B company and they had audiences in the government space, the healthcare space, and just a general, I guess, marketing space as well. They had products for all of those three industries. But you're kind of talking in the same voice to the marketers that you are to the government, like audience, and you can't do that. And I think that that's something that the B2B space is understanding, that they do need a solid narrative that goes beyond their products, and it's not so technical. Like it can't always be so technical. It kind of has to have that human aspect to also connect people as well.
Yeah, yeah. I guess in that kind of same vein, what is one of the most common mistakes brands make when trying to turn fans into a real engaged community? So this would be like an existing brand that has,
Mhm.
like it has more of that fan club status. Like what mistakes are they making when trying to convert it into a community?
I look at, I guess, when you say fan, the fan clubs or the fans, something that I see a lot is, I know that we mentioned the fans are more so a lot of times like on the superficial level. They're not always too ingrained in the mission of the company or the purpose.
Sure.
So trying to turn someone who's just like hype about the product itself into a person that is really, ingrained in the belonging. Like we'll take beauty for example, because I mentioned
Like
that.
active and engaged as well. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
like, yeah, in the culture. I think that the biggest thing, again, goes back to, understanding a lot of startups, especially, they don't know what to do with their fan clubs. Like, that is the number one mistake is like, there's no strategy for the fan clubs because sometimes fan clubs, they just happen. Like, they just come out of nowhere. And a lot of that is driven through social media. Like you wake up one day, you posted a meme or something, and like, wow, you have all these new fans that are like going crazy over a product. I think about like Labubus. Like, I mean, that was like a very interesting, like consumer product, but their mission for like what is it? H Mart, their mission and, was like really built into like the art scene and film. Like there's like a
Yeah.
huge like lore going back to Labubus, but nobody knows that because it's, people are just trying to get, these blind boxes. So I think, the biggest mistake is once you realize that you're starting to get fans and you're starting to get people that are really rallying behind you, especially defending you. I could even go back to Dr. Pepper, for example. They just had a fan on TikTok create that jingle, and then they used the
Yeah, I saw
jingle,
that.
yeah, and they put it, all over the place and things like that. I feel like you really have to, understand what you're doing. When you see someone like really engaging or, your numbers are really growing because of something, have a plan in place. And I think it gets hard because, like you mentioned, like marketing, we spoke about PR, like who's in charge of that? Who's in charge of the
Yeah.
fan? Who's in charge of the fan club strategy, essentially?
Yeah.
Which is kind of where cult communications comes in as well, is in order to bring your fan club into the larger community, you kind of do have to have like a plan. Like, are you going to have, create a Discord where you're talking about challenges or issues, or are you going to like bring them into, have a select few fans come into something that maybe is more mission driven, that you wouldn't normally bring them into? Something that we used to do or that I've done before in the past with clients is you might have like a major CEO like do a thought leadership panel with like a fan,
Yeah.
like at a major conference, like bring them into those mission driven, arenas so they can also kind of talk about their experience alongside a C-suite leader in the company or something like that.
Yeah, 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 yeah. Yeah, no, I mean, it definitely depends on the brand.
It
Like, for
does.
example, I worked I'm trying to make it more like a little bit more specific for listeners so they can kind of conceptualize. But like, for example, I was listening or I was working in a software company several years ago and I was a community manager. And what started out as just, kind of what happened in the forums for tech support, we slowly turned into a community where community members were problem solving together. So it wasn't just like a place
I
where
love that.
they shout in the void, like just like a feature request, site. Like now they were like doing bug fixes and feature requests and problem solving and finding novel ways to use our software in Slack and Discord channels that we created for them. And then like from those from Discord, we were identifying product evangelists, which kind of became like software influencers for us. So that was kind of
Oh,
way
I
of our
love that.
activating our community. Yeah.
I love the
So
idea of software influencers. I think that that's something else. Like Base 44 is like one of my favorite companies. Like you can create your own website in actually your own app, I should say. And I feel that like they just, created, they're looking for the face of their company. A lot of these tech companies are looking for the faces of their company um to, draw more attention. And you mentioned the software, I guess the software influencer side, I feel like we're going to see a lot more of those types of people that are meeting in those channels, like maybe become the face of a company because they already
yeah,
know like the inside of, the challenges, like you mentioned, like kind of like all the different intricacies of, what's going on. So I can definitely see
yeah.
that happening too.
Yeah, especially in like software, like you can find your product evangelist like on YouTube. Whoever's already giving a
Yeah.
tutorial of your software is a great, place to start for like brand representation, especially if like really the CEO is just like that is not my lane. Like
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm looking into the future. Like there's a lot of people on the ground that really want to step up and play that role. Like, and I
Yeah.
think that's like where a community naturally forms is when you have followers who like want to contribute in a meaningful way like that.
Totally. And I think going back to your question about like, let's say like the CEO doesn't want to be the face of the company, I definitely think that they do need to like really have an understanding of their fan base and like the fan clubs and everything so that there's someone that can step up to be, more of a voice.
Yeah.
I'm really a strong believer that there has to be some sort of voice for the company, whether it's more on the creative side or it's like a little bit more corporate. There has to be
Yeah.
someone.
Yeah, absolutely. What would you say is changing about cult brands in 2026 and what do you think is like officially dead?
Oh gosh. What's changing, of course, is definitely AI, like how AI kind of fits into the cult brand economy. I talk about the cult brand economy a lot just because I feel like cult brands are driving our economy in different ways, whether it's entertainment, tech, and whatnot. AI is making it a lot easier for people to create cult brands, to really narrow down on your narrative, to connect with people, and also just to kind of get your message out there. So I think that is one of the biggest things that we're seeing shift is how does AI play into you discovering your fans? What is your tech stack for your cult brand in terms of um, creating fan bases, but also creating a purpose-driven community alongside that as well.
Yeah. I think also like it's funny, it's like AI is like helping in this way, but also I think what's officially dead is you can no longer use AI as a differentiator. Like it is not important
Exactly.
for you to mention that you have AI in your product. Like so does everyone else. Like
That is so true.
I think that's kind of what is dead is like just communicating that AI is part of their software. Like
It's
yeah,
not
so is
enough.
it's not
Yeah.
enough.
It's not enough anymore. I definitely agree that when you're creating a narrative, like just simply saying like we're using AI as the next tech, like the next technology future, like you can't really use that innovative storyline anymore, like because everyone does have AI. I think also too, and of course this is not all founders, but we are seeing, especially in the tech space, it's not enough to kind of, I guess, not have a personality. We're seeing a lot more people in tech really showcase their personality. It's not necessarily like a cold industry anymore. Like before
Mhm.
social media, tech was a lot colder. It was not
Yeah.
as fun. It was, very corporate-y. And I've noticed like throughout my career, even as a PR person, when I'm working on, tech related clients, is like they're not just looking for corporate messaging for LinkedIn. They want you to have like be able to talk a certain type of way that, feels more human. So I think we're getting away from just like the cold C-suite, I guess, lens. We're seeing a lot more people really diving into like their own individual passions. I see people talking about on LinkedIn, I love to run. I have, a personality. There are things that I like to do
Yeah.
outside of being a CEO, which I love that. And that kind of helps like me as like a cult communicator is like creating stories that go beyond just the product themselves, especially when you're talking about the people that are creating the products, the engineers and different things. Like even engineers now have a voice when they are getting like for thought leadership and whatnot. So we're definitely seeing a lot of, I guess, the traditional sense of um just how we're communicating with one another die. As well as, I guess, from a PR perspective, I'll just also throw in that we're definitely seeing traditional PR die. It's been dead for a while now. As I mentioned, the media hits, like as an AI company, you could get into every major, like you can get into Forbes, you can get into Business Insider, you can get into all these things, but do you have an audience? Like, do you have, fans? And some companies don't. Like, they might be
Yeah.
getting a lot of media coverage, but they don't necessarily have like a fan base that is, going to really rally behind what they're doing.
Yeah. Like, it's so funny because when I think of PR, like, I literally just think of like press releases and that's it.
I know a lot of people do. Like, it's really a lot. And I think that like PR
Can you
is a
tell
part
us
of
like a little
community
bit more
building.
about like the full scope of PR? Like, because like I'm
Okay.
sitting here, I'm like, I came from a marketing background and I'm like, still like, so what?
No, I understand. It is very complex. I think like traditionally when people think about PR, especially like in the startup space, a lot of times when people like come to me, I kind of have to like let them know like it's more than that. It's more than media relations. That's usually what, people are looking for. They want to have their bylines, they want to be in magazines, they want to be on podcasts talking about their product. But
Mm-hmm.
it's not just about like the outreach component. It's really also about, again, like the narrative and the positioning, because I'm like, when it comes to cult communications, I always feel that when you are getting a media placement, it should be something like, it shouldn't just be like a press release, like you said. It shouldn't just be like, our product does this, da 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 da, here's a
Yeah.
statement. It should be a lot more storytelling. You know,
Mm-hmm.
your media relations should be more storytelling. And when it comes to PR, we're not just, of course, on the media side. We are also, we're building events. We're, getting people in the room. We're also, there's product communications, but there's also communications internally with how you communicate with your organization. So like,
Right.
internal newsletters, like all the town halls, like literally organizing all the communications that happens inside the business as well as a part of that. Also something else that I work on a lot is the funding, like the press decks, like the decks for investors, like making sure that if you are going after funding or if you're going after like a grant or like one of the pitch competitions, that, your narrative is strong enough to really entice investors. And a lot of times you can't use the same narrative that you're using just for your product for an investor. It needs to be a lot stronger. You mean you're
Yeah.
asking for money?
Yeah. You have to have like you're bringing in the market research, like
Yeah.
what is your
Yeah.
what's your biggest differentiator? Like are you filling a market need? Like is there product
It's
market
so
fit? Like
much.
all of the above.
And a lot of times, like, of course, that can be done by, I know marketing people like work on pitch decks and everything as well as too. But I think what's been missing from the conversation is that PR people, we often get left out of the conversation and we get looped into marketing, and it is a little bit different. I think the number one difference is that, as PR people, we kind of have the connections to like the media,
Mm-hmm.
as well as the conferences, as well as like some of the newsletters and the producers and things like that. So we kind of know what they're looking for.
Sure.
Of course, anyone can help, like, of course, with certain things, like, especially now that we have all these tools, we have Canva now. Like, we
Yeah.
have all these different things, but at the same time, you're going to need those relationships to really add credibility to your product. Getting on all of these different things are a way for you to kind of tell your story as you're going into a funding round.
Yeah. No, that's super helpful. Thank you for taking the time to kind
No,
of clarify
absolutely.
that. Let's see. I wrote these questions down and I'm like, does this make sense?
They're so good.
So I believe this came from one of your Substack articles. You talk about exclusivity strengthening belonging. Can you talk a little bit more
Yeah.
about that?
Yeah, so exclusivity isn't something, of course, that is new, but I do feel that in 2026, how we're going about being exclusive is a little bit different. Especially when it comes to certain, I guess industries like fashion and beauty, you kind of have to be very careful when you're mentioning exclusivity because, a lot of beauty cult brands are talking about inclusivity, So you kind of have
Yeah.
to you have to be very
Yeah.
careful. You have to be very careful with, how you're kind of
It's like it's for
creating.
everybody, but only a few people can have it. It's exclusive, but it was created for everyone.
Exactly. But I think that's why a lot of people do create like the fan clubs, the private members communities, and different things like that. Especially in tech, there are so many private members communities in the tech space. And I feel like, a lot of tech companies are creating those private spaces to add the exclusivity because, let's say you're a startup and you're, you want to do like a dinner or something and you're only inviting 50 other startup founders in the AI space, that type of exclusivity, you can kind of build as like a roundtable where you're discussing with other tastemakers and like-minded peers and different things like that. So it does add more of a belonging structure to that area of the business as well as to the industry. But I think when it comes to exclusivity, even on the consumer side, as it relates to like, to me, exclusivity could be like, okay, we're going to give our first 100 super fans like free merch.
You're right, right.
Those types of things makes people feel super special. It's like a psychological tactic. It really adds to, that feeling of feeling close to the brand. And it also like is scarcity. It makes other people look at you like, oh my gosh, like, why didn't I get that? I love this brand too. So it kind of is like a marketing play in a sense, it's a PR play in a sense, but it's something that I do believe that all brands kind of have to figure out how to be exclusive in their own way, because it is like a great belonging tactic and all brands do it.
Yeah. I'm realizing I think the tactics and strategies are so much easier to conceptualize with consumer brands. Just
I
because I
know.
think that like because like the end user is human. I mean, like the end user in, B2B is also human, but it's like for the
It's
business.
hard.
So it's like it just doesn't and I say this because I worked in B2B for so long and I'm always like, "Bleh, this is dry."
No, it is. It is. I want it to be fun. I think like a part of my like passion is like I want to make some of the areas of tech that are boring. Like I love cybersecurity as well. And I'm just like, they need to catch up to the
Yeah.
consumer brands. But yeah.
What do you think makes a community irreplaceable in the AI area?
Ooh, that's a really
Sorry,
good
not
question.
AI area, AI.
No, you're fine. Okay. We're in the AI era. What makes community irreplaceable? I mean, it sounds very like cliche, but like being able to connect on a human level. I know that you probably saw this, Megan, but like Gucci recently used like AI in their recent like fashion, I
Was
guess
it a fashion show?
it wasn't their fashion show. It was a piece of just content on Instagram. It
Mhm.
kind of looked like GTA a little bit. A lot of people were
Okay.
talking about it, but we're seeing like, that is like a cult brand essentially. And, it's been around for like decades and you're using AI. So I feel like just use that as an example. You don't want to take away from the human aspect of your legacy and your heritage. I feel like what makes brands irreplaceable is being able to, if you've been around for a long time, to maintain your legacy and your heritage as a brand. And if you're starting off new, it's your ability, of course, to also be able to connect with people on a human level offline as well.
Yeah.
Um, because AI is like you can't take AI necessarily into like your like physical real life. So the brands that are able to do that are going to win every time. And it goes back to your narrative again as well. Like I feel like I keep bringing that up, but it really does go back to that. Like your narrative is like basically the words that you use to connect with your audience. So I feel like brands, like I see a lot of brands create their own words, their own language. DoorDash does that a lot. Other brands, do this too. Like you have to be able to create your own language in order to like kind of get away from AI. AI is not necessarily real. It's supposed to be a tool to kind of help you and guide you, but it shouldn't be something that's replacing completely all of your systems. And I think we're going to see a lot of that, honestly. Brands not really understanding what to do with AI at all. They want to say that they're using AI in this world because it's newsworthy. If you can put
Mhm.
AI in a story, it is a lot easier to get media coverage and attention for, but at the same time, it can't come at an expense of like you've lost your human
Right.
abilities.
Yeah. I don't know why this was like sticking in my head as you were talking about brands like using like specifically consumer brands using AI because the first thing that came in my head was so Coke always did
Oh yeah.
their Christmas advertisements and it was like always something that was like really nostalgic, always
Yeah.
looked forward to. And I think it was this year or last year they just started using AI to like for all of their animations and it was really obvious. And I was like, well, that was like like it's just something that like they were
It's
known
really
for. And I was
obvious.
like, yeah, it was so obvious. I was like, that just feels so cheap and like I don't even connect with it at
Yeah.
all anymore. Like the visuals.
I'm glad that you said that because like I do feel like the companies that are getting the biggest hit when it comes to using AI are those older companies. Like you've been
Hmm.
around this long not using AI, you've done amazing. Like why are we trying to like cheapen the look? Especially when it comes to luxury brands. I do not think luxury brands should be using AI at all. Like on
Mm-mm.
their social media or anything. I think it looks so bad.
Yeah, yeah. Agreed. Agreed.
Yeah.
Like you have the money to invest in like real photography, like
Yeah.
do that. Do that
Yeah.
instead.
Absolutely.
We don't want to see models with like 6 fingers.
No. No, we do not. So, like, you mentioned, like, the prices of, like, the products, like, I just feel like it's not fair to the consumers.
But I guess as we kind of wrap things up, is there anything that I've left out or that you feel like we haven't covered about PR and community that you'd like to speak on?
I think I just when I guess end it is just say, like, I'm just really excited about just I know the PR world really isn't something that everyone knows about, but it really is changing a lot. A lot of my PR peers are creating, their own systems and communities to help serve the startup community as well, even beyond myself. And I think this is like a new shift of being able to create your own framework in the PR world because just like cult communications, a lot of things just aren't working anymore. And
Mhm.
it's up to like PR leaders like myself to really just come in and like bring new ideas and new concepts to help serve, like these growing number of startups that are coming out like literally every single day. It's not enough anymore just to like go to a large PR agency anymore. You
Yeah,
kind of have to,
right. Or like
yeah.
finding novel ways to make community like your PR engine, you know? Like,
Yes,
yeah.
yes, exactly, exactly.
Yeah, because it can just be, it's not easy, but it could be as simple as that, you know?
Yeah, I think people are still like, and I would love to hear what you think. Like, I think people are still like on the fence sometimes when it comes to community, depending on the industry.
Hmm.
They just, especially I'll speak on tech, which is hard, but like,
Yeah.
I feel like tech is still like behind when it comes to like building community. Like, it's still very new, but now more than ever, like, a lot of startups do not work with major PR agencies. They're working with more boutique agencies, if anything, or like independent PR people because one, they can't really afford the full structure of it. And as well as like, especially cult brands, again, like they don't need the same level of, they need a different type of visibility. And it's usually visibility to help their community systems.
Yeah. When I think,
Yeah.
yeah, I think this goes back to like the way I see community in the software space. So I think of like, Canva, MailChimp, HubSpot,
Yes. Love
Circle,
Canva.
like all these platforms that community is because it's solving a major problem in a lot of people's like small businesses and
Mhm.
they're wanting to come together and like swap, tactics and how-tos and tutorials and novel ways of using the software to like make their businesses run. I think that's
Yeah.
like where I see community the most in software. Like I feel like I'm missing a whole piece of it like
Well,
as I think about it, but
another piece that I'm really interested in is like, Luma and Partyful, the apps that are like
yeah.
for events. Like that is like another way that like I see like those are apps that are kind of driving the cult brand economy because when you're creating events through like things like that, like Luma like powers well Luma or Partyful, they power like New York Tech Week, Los Angeles Tech Week, San Francisco Tech Week.
Yeah.
And it's like you're building these little cult events as well, like for your company. But again, like it's still not enough. Essentially, you still kind of have to like once you put your event on Luma or one of these apps, you still have to be able to create that experience in person.
Yeah, yeah. Because even
Yeah.
like so for the platform I'm using to record this podcast, like Riverside, like they
Love Riverside.
have they have a community on how to use it, tutorials. Like there's a big, I watched like a ton of YouTube videos and there's different like incentives or like affiliate programs. So it just like looks different, but it's there. Like the
Yeah.
the community is there. So this has been super enlightening. I guess for those
Yes.
listening, what's the best way to connect with you, work with you, all of that good stuff?
Yeah. The best way to connect with me, Ari McDaniel on LinkedIn, of course, but you can also reach me on my Substack, which is called Cultworthy, which is,
Love it.
a platform that I'm, actively on, sharing all of my cult communications tips and advice.
And like what stage startups do you typically work with?
I usually
Or
work
does
with
it
I really work with early stage startups, but I've started working with Series B and Series C, but a lot of early stage startups just because they're kind of starting their narratives and whatnot. But I'm open to working with all startups. I am based in New York and I travel to the West Coast every now and then as well.
awesome. I will include all of that in the show notes, but it's been such
Yes.
a pleasure sitting down with you today. This has been a really different and enlightening conversation. So I'm just so excited we had a chance to chat.
Yes, same here. I'm so excited just for this entire podcast. I feel like the industry needs it 100%.
Amazing. Thank you for saying
Yes.
that.
No, really.
If this conversation lit something up in you, this is your sign. Share the episode, start the conversation, build the thing. And if you're creating community, hosting gatherings, or building spaces people actually care about, I want to meet you. I'm Megan Lycan, and this is Hot Girls Build Cults.